program. My name is Anna Merscow. I am with the Amador Resource Conservation District. I am the Healthy Soils Natural Resource Technician. First things first, would you folks be okay if we record this meeting? The cameras in the back, it should just only be focused on me. Matt's checking it to make sure that none of you are caught into it. Are you fine with that? If you would prefer not, we don't have to do that.
No problem.
Go ahead. Is that fine? Okay, thanks, Matt. Okay, so like I said, I am the Healthy Soils Natural Resource Technician. The Healthy Soils program is originally started back in 2017 with California Department of Food and Ag. It is a program to financially support farmers and ranchers statewide with implementing soil conservation practices. In my role, my service here, although I am based out of the Amador Resource Conservation District, my service area is Amador, Calaveras, Tuolumne, and Alpine. So I'm available for farmers and ranchers throughout this entire region to assist with this program. The program, like I said, is to help implement soil conservation practices. And there are currently 2 funding streams available to the Central Sierra region growers for soil conservation practices implementation. So the first one is the CDFA Healthy Soils Incentives Program. These are direct to farmer grants. They are, again, created to financially support the implementation of healthy soil practices, soil conservation practices, and they provide assistance, technical assistance to ranchers and farmers in the implementation of those practices. So in my role as a technical assistance provider, I am available to assist you with going through the application process, any questions you have about the practices, any questions you have with doing the application, assisting with any computer work with the application. And then if you are awarded, I am also available to assist you with the implementation process, whether that is helping you identify suppliers for the materials needed for the practices, answering any questions, pooling resources from UCCE or the NRCS with any in terms of any soil questions. So I am available to be of assistance to you. Currently, there is 11 million available in funding statewide. Okay, so it's going to be a highly competitive grant period. The anticipated application window is for us opening January 22nd at noon and will last through February 9th at 5 p.m. So it's a very short grant application window as well. One thing to be mindful about, this application window was meant to have opened back in November. So they delayed it out for 3 months. So one thing to be mindful about while I'm saying it is going to be a statewide competition for it, not only that is what it's making it competitive. People have had 3 additional months to prepare their applications for it. So my advice is, if you are interested in this grant, please contact me immediately. Please start looking at the application immediately, because given how competitive it will be, my guess is the first 3 days are going to be where the bulk of the grants come out of, the awardees come out of. The awards are up to $100,000, and the duration of the program is for 3 years. So you would find out by June if you were awarded. Then we would go through the process of preparing. You would do a fall 2024 implementation, and then for the subsequent 2 years. So the grant period would end in 2027. There is a preview on the website, a preview for a request for grant applications, which I will walk you through a bit later. But this is where the bulk of the information is about, like, what the program is, who's eligible, who's not eligible, what the application process is, as well as what the practices are and what the guidelines and requirements and verification process is for each of those practices. Now, Within this, specific to this incentives program grant, they do have a number of priority groups that they would like to see the funds go to. Those include socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers, first-time applications, and multi-practice applications. So the definition of a multi-practice application is one in which your project design budget, so you would create your project design, and you would have a budget based off of the payment rates that are associated with each practice. So the payment rates are the reimbursement rate from CDFA. Okay, so you would have the project design would then have a total budget. What they would like to see is that no more than 80% of that budget is dedicated to just one practice. Okay, my suggestion would be look for 2 to 3 practices. I would not suggest going for more than 3 practices. It's a lot to implement them individually as it is. And people can become quite overburdened with, once you get into the 4 to 5, the verification process, it's a lot. So I would say prime threshold is 2 to 3 practices. Eligible operations include grazing lands, vineyards, tree crops, field crops, row crops, commercial nurseries, nursery stock production, greenhouse operations, and hemp operations. Operations that are not eligible are ones that include marijuana, potted plants, and any operation utilizing non-soil growing media. One thing to know, if you are a leasee, you are eligible for this grant. You will have to obtain a landowner's agreement with the property owner to implement. If you are a landowner and you want your leasee to do this, they are eligible for you to do it. The agreement can be for just 1 year, but ideally it should be for the full 3-year term of the grant. The second funding opportunity is through the Central Sierra Healthy Soils Program. So to go back to the incentives grant, to explain to you very quickly, this all will be administrated. Your application will be reviewed. It will be administrated. Your communications will be directly with a grant specialist, as well as /scientist within CDFA. Okay. The Central Sierras Healthy Soils Program is a pilot program. CDFA has felt that it might be best to explore to explore how this program, if it could be streamlined and worked better for the operators by being administrated by the RCDs or organizations that work directly with farmers and ranchers in an already simple way. So the Placer Resource Conservation District was awarded this block grant. It is a joint venture between Placer, Amador, El Dorado, and Georgetown Divide RCDs. We're working together to implement it, and it covers specifically the Central Sierra region, Placer, Amador, Calaveras, Tuolumne, Alpine, El Dorado, Nevada City, and East Sacramento counties. Again, it is meant to financially support the implementation of soil conservation practices and provide the technical assistance in order to do that. The total amount is $3.4 million available in funding for direct farmer grants. This is the most amount of funding that's ever been put into the Central Sierra region since the beginning of the program. So this is a huge opportunity and so much less competitive, and we are hoping to be able to award up to 50, if not more, projects. The anticipated application window opens in February 2024. I do not have a specific date for you yet, and there is really no deadline end date because we're just going to wait to see how long it takes for all the money to be doled out. Awards for this grant are up to $200,000. Again, the duration of the program is for 3 years. There is also a preview request for grant applications. Again, I will show you where you can find that. And many of the same situations as with it's the exact same eligibility for this grant. And if you're a leasee, you're also eligible for this grant. The one benefit about this is that the grant will be administered by Placer. The technical review will be by technical assistance providers. There is no multiple practice obligation for this grant. There is an understanding amongst the technical assistance providers. We don't want to overburden the agricultural operators by pressuring you guys to implement too many practices. We want to work with you to make sure that your project design is robust and that you will be successful. You can only be funded through one of these programs. So means, yes.
Definition of what are you referring to as practices?
I will show you that in just a moment, but also this sheet right here covers the eligible.
Those are the practices.
Those are the practices, yeah.
And when you're saying duration of program is 3 years, so when you make an application, you're looking to split up the cost divided by 3.
Yes. And so, well, and that's because, and I will get to that just in a moment, but some practices are a one-time implementation and some practices are a 3-time implementation. Okay, so they're an annual implementation, such as compost spreading. So the total award amount will take that into consideration. You'll see a total award amount, but there will be a verification process in it all. There is an advance payment, but most of it is refunded through reimbursement rates as you provide the verification throughout the years that A, you've done the practice, and B, in some of them, such as hedgerow planting or tree and shrub establishment, you need to show that you've managed to keep those plants alive. So these are the eligible agricultural management practices. They are divided up, as you can see on this sheet, between grazing land, orchards and vineyards, and cropland. A couple things to be mindful of. And just so I know, how many folks in here manage grazing operations? And then how many are orchard and vineyards? Okay. And how many cropland? So some of these practices, so that just lets me know to show it all. But some of these practices are, like I said, an annual implementation, such as the compost application, cover cropping, natural materials mulching. Some of them are a one-time implementation. So that would be such as, like I said, hedgerow planting. Wood chips are a one-time application. A riparian forest buffer, that is a one-time implementation. But again, throughout the years, in the incentive grant, you can implement those one-time operations, those one-time practices in the first or second year. But by year 3, you need to show that you've been able to monitor and keep those plants alive. In the Central Sierras program, these practices can only be done in year 1 because it's much more stringent between CDFA checking that we are doing our due diligence with making sure that you guys are being successful with the practices. Practices are vetted throughout the application process to make sure that they're suitable for the land type. There are requirements and guidelines that exist for each practice. That is covered in the request for grant applications. There are practices that are considered non-overlapping practices. You can't apply for both of them on the same parcel of land that you're doing practice implementation, which, for example, cover cropping and mulching. It's just kind of most of them are pretty common sense. You wouldn't implement those practices together because you would be mulching your cover crop. It doesn't make any sense. So one thing to be mindful of, project modifications are permitted. So you can submit your application if you are awarded. You can modify in the sense that the seed that you want to put down isn't available from the suppliers. You might also be able to modify the acreage at which you're doing. And with CDFA's incentives grant, you might be able to modify the implementation year, okay? But you must receive approval to do these modifications, but I would say they're fairly common in the sense that anyone who's had an agricultural operation knows that things don't necessarily go to plan. So it does give you a bit of a buffer with that. Now, one thing to be mindful about, when you apply, there are payment rates, there are payment scenarios by which you're applying for, okay? So for example, with the compost application, you are applying for, the payment scenario is you will apply for either on-farm produced compost or for certified facilities buying compost, okay? That one's a bad example because you might be able to modify between the two. But some of them you cannot modify between the payment scenario. For example, some people have had it kicked back. They've accidentally put down native seed broadcasting for rangeland planting. Okay, but the seed that they ended up selecting was not appropriate for that, right? So there's give and take with it, and it just depends truly. Once you get passed and awarded, there's more room for modification. Within the application stage, if your application gets kicked back, especially with the incentives program, you will go back in the queue once you get your application back in. So just be mindful of that when putting your application together. And because that money is going to go so quickly, it won't have that flexibility. Go ahead.
And I know in previous years, it's like a first come, first served program. So it sounds like that's how it is this year.
Yeah, so it's first come, first served, except for with the incentives program, like I said, they are prioritizing those first three. So socially disadvantaged, multi-practice, and first-time applicants. So if you are in those priority groups, your application comes through, if you're in those priority groups, you get put to the front of the queue. Everyone else goes in a queue that will then be looked at after they've met their quotas for those priority groups, okay? They are encouraging folks to apply for both. And I will get to that in a second. Practices to be mindful of, and I'll move over since some of you are probably. If you are wanting to implement one of these riparian herbaceous covers or a riparian forest buffer, that will likely go through a process of your project design. You'll definitely need to work with a technical assistance provider because riparian habitats, they're a sensitive habitat, and more than likely, if you are funded through this, if you want to do it through this state funding, it will have to go through, ideally, it will go through as a notice of exemption, and you won't have to go through the CEQA process, an environmental impact report. So that's why it's really important to work with a technical assistance provider on these two specifically, because you don't want to run into the fact of down the road, you're finding out this all later on. Prescribed grazing, that one's on these ones. But with prescribed grazing, you have to work with a certified rangeland manager to have a prescribed grazing plan that must be submitted with the application. So realistically, as a practice going into this year, probably not realistic for submitting for an application. But if you are interested in applying for prescribed grazing, please contact me. We can then go through the process in this upcoming year to get you in contact with a certified rangeland manager, get you that grazing plan so that when the next cycle of funding opens up, you'll already have your plan. And the last one is hedgerow planting. It is becoming increasingly more popular as a practice. There's more organizations and agencies giving out grants to folks wanting to do hedgerow planting. Nurseries are strapped for supplies. If you want to do this, get in contact with your nursery now and start making your plan now and get your order in as soon as possible, because supplies are becoming more limited, and contacting someone in the autumn when you're getting ready to plant out, the supplies will be gone. I probably don't need to tell you folks this. So the benefits of these practices are to increase the soil organic matter, which increases the fertility and energy storage within your soil. This has a cascading effect down onto soil permeability and water holding capacity, invasive and noxious weed control. Scott Oneto, who's the farm advisor here locally for UCCE, he's doing some great research right now, specifically on compost spreading combined with rangeland seeding to outcompete with star thistle and a whole other host of invasive and noxious weeds. Crop and forage quality and abundance. It will assist the soil microbial community health. There's pollinator benefits. There's water and air quality benefits. This one, the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, that's what the state wants to see in your application. They want to see that when you implement these practices, that you can quantify greenhouse gas emissions reductions. And you're probably wondering how you do that. There is software to assist you to do that. You do not have to figure that out on your own. That's within the application itself. So to give you guys some examples of what some folks have been able to do, we had a farmer who was awarded for no-till. He was able to purchase a no-till drill. That's his irrigated pasture. This is a hedgerow that we had another farmer implement. Folks who have done the hedgerows have seen a massive return of abundance in terms of insect life. A lot of folks are really excited because they're seeing the monarchs come back to their properties that they hadn't seen. This is millet seeding up in Alpine County on uncultivated land. So restoring the forage there. And then one thing to know is that through this program, there is funding for us to be able to put on events for you. That means we can, if you are wanting to talk to someone about rangeland seeding and invasive weeds, we can design an event. We can get a rangeland specialist to come in. We can host this meeting. We can do a vineyards event where we get vineyard specialists who specialize in cover cropping and things like that. So this is designed for you. And that's what this operator survey in front of each of you is for. That is so that it lets me know if you're interested in technical assistance. You can be anonymous and not want technical assistance, but if you would like to let me know what resources you would like to see made available to you within this community, that informs me how to better do my job for you. So please let me know what your resource concerns are. Please let me know what equipment you're looking for. And please let me know, what's an event that we could put on that would be a benefit to you. So this is an example payment scenario. So like I said, so you have 25 acres. A rancher wanted to do compost spreading on 25 acres. This is the current payment rate. It is $64.32 a ton. CDFA has raised the payment rate for that. Please be mindful when it comes to the payment rates, they are a flat rate. So if you are awarded this year and we run into issues with inflation again over the next following years, that rate will remain the same. It does not rise with inflation. And like I said, some of them are a one-time implementation, sometimes are an annual implementation. One thing that you will need to do, and so you can see the funding here would be for hedgerows would be a one-time funding, okay? One thing to please know, you will be required to take soil samples per practice that you implement. Those practices are taken before you implement. Sorry, those soil samples are taken before you implement the practice. That is so that they can continue to obtain baseline data of how nutrients are being stored into your soil. And it is per practice. It is covered by CDFA within your award. Okay, it's part of your budget. It's built into the budget. They're coming out of $50 per sample is what the payment rate is. And I can work with you in identifying a lab. And if you have any questions about what you need to do in order to take that soil sample and get it submitted to, I can assist you with that as well. One thing to be mindful of, it is 4 years of soil samples that they want, starting the first year before you start practice implementation. The 4th year is outside the grant term, and that will be on your dime to take that soil sample. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and show you guys the payment, the documents of where you can find this. So if you just type in CDFA Healthy Soils Program, it will take you to this homepage. Right here, you'll see Healthy Soils Program Incentives Grants. If you click on that, this one's quite easy. Click on that. It has information about the upcoming solicitation period. It has the preview requests for grant applications. This is Appendix A. This is on page 32. This goes through each land use type. So agricultural system, and then you'll have grazing, and then you'll have orchards and vineyards. It goes through the practice. It will talk about what the practice implementation is. So again, talking about compost, you have on-farm produced compost, or you have purchased compost. And it has the carbon to nitrogen ratio in that. So you can either go for carbon to nitrogen ratio above 11. That means there's less nitrogen in the compost, which would be better for rangeland seeding. You don't want to spread carbon to nitrogen below 11. That means it's high in nitrogen. If you spread that on rangeland, you're more likely to encourage weeds. Then you have the option of with cropland, it's 3, 4, or 5 tons. With grazing, it's 6, 7, or 8 tons. That is considered on the conservative side for compost spreading. Okay, and then you can see from there the payment rates change per the amount, per the type. And then it talks about what the required documentation is or implementation is, implementation guidelines, and then the verification requirements. Okay. All of these practices are NRCS designated practices. So you can find more information through NRCS about these practices specifically, but I will say those are documents that are for information nationwide. They don't give a great deal of detail of the actual implementation and also the realities of what it is to implement in the Central Sierra region, okay? And that's another thing I wanted to say. Please be mindful, these payment rates are meant to cover 100% of the cost. However, like I did not say this earlier, but I'll say it now. These are based off of an average, okay? And one thing that I really want to emphasize to this group, that average includes coastal, valley, and the mountainous areas, which means that the logistical realities of being in a mountainous region, your supplies and materials will not be as readily available as, say, if you are in San Joaquin Valley. Okay, so that is for, and then if you scroll up, you will see, I will go to page 1. See, this is for the request for grant applications. You scroll down. Here's the table of contents. It lets you know all the major changes, definitions about the program, grant application process, review and selection process, notification, feedback, and submission. It goes through, gives you as much information as possible. But if you have any questions, I'm available to help assist you. Okay. Then heading back, On this as well is a preview application. So this will let you know all of the information that you need to collect for your application. Okay, so I would highly suggest looking through this, getting this information prepared now so that, like I said, on January 22nd, you just go in, you have it all ready. You can even copy and paste it off of another document you have, but all you have to do is set up your application portal and you have all the information readily available to you, putting you at the front of the queue. Okay, then we also have going to go back to the Healthy Soils Program webpage. Scrolling down, right here is the HSP Block Grant Pilot. That is the Central Sierra program is a part of that block grant pilot. Scroll down. This one is less obvious because there's multiple awardees for this. You need to go to recipient resources. Okay. And here you will see the request for grant applications. Again, you will see the payment, the practice payment scenarios, rates, requirements, and implementation guides. And you will see, again, it is a request for grant applications, but this one is specific to the block grant program, okay? Heading back, you will also see a preview of applications here, okay? Any questions?
So I've done the Healthy Soils program down in the valley,
Mm-hmm.
and everything you said, the biggest hurdle, the biggest problem was that grant. Having somebody write that grant. I had a gal from the college do it for me because it was just, for me, it was mind-boggling. Is the process, the grant application process, more streamlined now?
Yes. When did you?
So I did it in 2021, 22.
Okay.
Down, this was on irrigated pasture,
Okay.
and I mean, it was a great program.
Right.
Yeah, all the compost is a game changer on the irrigated pasture. But yeah, just that grant was just,
Yeah.
I
So,
couldn't do it. There's no way I could have done it. And that's what you're there for.
yes, I'm here to help you with the application. They have done some significant changes with the application, trying to streamline it. And this is another reason why I'm here for you. Whatever issues you're having, let me know. It's my job to report it back to the people who are administrating what's not working, what is working. There's also some advocacy groups who work within the legislature who are directly invested in this program. They want to see the program work well, so they are also advocating within the legislature to make sure that the money's there and to make sure that the process is working the way ideally it should be working for farmers and ranchers. Okay, it's the reality of this program was written by the legislature with not a lot of understanding of what it means to implement it on the ground. So since the beginning of this program to now, there's been a lot of having to fine tune how it works, and certainly with the application, I know that's a big one. And that's why I'm available, but they've also done some changes to the application itself, even between last year to this year, some major changes that should make it more manageable. To give you just an idea, we have had 14 awards. These are folks who are currently in the process of implementing these practices across Amador, Calaveras, and Alpine, totaling 6,990 acres. Practice breakdown. The most popular statewide is composting, hedgerows, cover crops, and mulching. For this area, range seeding's been a dominant practice, which makes sense. But you can see people have been awarded for prescribed grazing, riparian forest buffers, mulching, cover crops, reduced tillage, silvopasture. So, but like I said, I mean, we want to see you succeed. So I would just say have caution with how many practices you pick out. and what you want to do, and definitely talk to someone about any of the practices that you might not be familiar with. This is one of our current awardees. He has managed through the Healthy Soils program to, in one round of funding, do compost spreading across 60 acres of grazing lands. And he was recently, he was part of that 2021 cohort that have been awarded for rangeland seeding and planting a hedgerow. And he's seen some real improvements within not just his soil from the soil testing and the texture and the porosity and all of that, but he's also found that when it comes to having to deal with things like medusa head and star thistle, he's seen a real improvement in his grazing lands. So this is the incentives awards process. Now, couple things to say before I move on. If you've been awarded in the past, you cannot apply for the same practices on the same lands. If you want to apply for the same lands, you have to implement a new practice. Okay? These practices, this award can not be cost shared with other funding streams. Okay? So if you are rangeland seeding on a certain acreage, but you have, and that's being funded through a different funding stream, if you have additional acreage that was not funded, you can apply for that additional acreage. Or if you want to apply on the same land for, okay, so say you have a funding stream covering compost spreading, okay, but you want to implement rangeland seeding, you can apply for rangeland seeding on the same. It cannot be the same practice on the same land, okay? And your APN and your unique tax ID number will let them know if you've been awarded in the past, and they will be able to see from your previous plans what's been implemented. One other thing to be mindful of, if you have implemented any of those practices in the last year, you are ineligible, okay? You need to have had a break in implementing those practices. So if you've been covering the cost of compost spreading on your land on your own, you need to wait a year in order to apply for the funding for the state to pay for it, which seems silly, but you know. All right, going through this. To go through the awards process, contact ARCD. You can contact me if you so choose. One thing to be mindful about, if on your application you cannot work with you do not list a technical assistance provider on your application, that essentially locks out a technical assistance provider from being able to assist you later on in the process. So essentially, you now have to implement the whole thing on your own. You can't go to a technical assistance provider asking for help later on. Even if you don't work with us in the application process, I still highly suggest list a technical assistance provider so that later on down the road, if you need technical assistance, we can be made available to you. Okay, so go ahead, contact me. The intake meeting, we can do an intake meeting. We'll talk about your resource concerns. We'll talk about your land use. We'll talk about what practices you're interested. We'll talk about the realities of implementing those practices, what the feasibility of those practices are. If you would like, I can conduct a site visit, and then we can work together on building out your application. So, like I showed you, there's the draft application. Take a look through it, start collecting that information now. The project design is designed in a software called Replan. Okay, so it is a mapping system. It's a mapping software that has all of the practices already put into it, all the payment scenarios put into it. It has, and it also has the greenhouse gas emissions tracking within it. So really what you need to do, you go in, you outline what your fields are. Then you have to, if you have any structures or roads in there that the practice won't be implemented in, You need to take those out. So there's a bit of drawing in it, or drawing lines really. And then you let them know what practice you want to implement, what payment scenario you want to go through. You might have to tell them what crops have previously been planted there, what you want to plant in the future. Within the replan, they do have, they've now incorporated suggestion lists for planting out, say, a hedgerow or a tree line. They will have a list that they've already put in there. I would say go ahead and do some research on your own of what you would like to put in first, because that's kind of covers the whole entirety of California. So you can pick something that really should be growing out on the coastal area that would not survive within the Central Sierra region. So some resources in terms of deciding, tree lines or hedgerows, look at CalFlora, look at eVeg, the NRCS eVeg, and even Cal Landscape or CalScape. I quite like that. It does a pretty good job. You can click on your location and it has a pretty good list of plants that you can use as well. So those are 3 ones. The other people I would say contact any seed suppliers and nurseries. A lot of seed suppliers and nurseries have people available to help assist you with seed selection and plant selection. Cornflower Nursery in particular in Sacramento, they have someone that we've worked with in the past who has done a great job of being able to let people know what they know will work on their land. Okay. And as well, like Camprath Seeds. If any of you have heard Camprath Seeds, they're a good seed supplier. They have folks who can definitely work with you on deciding what seeds would be best for your land. Okay. Then once your project design is created, you have to take a PDF and attach it to your application. You submit your application. CDFA goes through the process of reviewing your application. CDFA is only doing an administrative review on this round. Okay. In the past, they've done administrative and technical to help save themselves the workload. They've chosen just to do an administrative review. Like I said, that first year, you are eligible for a 25% advance payment. Then you would go ahead in the autumn, implement the project. You would submit your verification. And like I said, that's in the appendix. Submit your verification as soon as you do it, because especially with CDFA, they are already managing previously awarded rounds as well as this round. Get yourself in the queue to be verified as soon as possible, because it does take time. Full transparency, it does take time for them to go through the verification process. Once it's verified, they send you an invoice. You sign the invoice, you submit it to them. They have 45 days to reimburse you. Okay, so the first year would be a 75% reimbursement, and then carrying on with years 2 and 3, 100% reimbursement. Okay, and one thing as well to be aware of, 10% is held on to by CDFA, kind of as a bit of an insurance in case you don't carry it through to the end of the grant term. Okay,
10%.
of the grant. Like,
So if you get $100,000 granted, you get 25% ahead, then you get the other 75.
Yeah.
There's still gonna be 10% at the end that they're gonna give you once you complete the
Once-
practices that you promised.
once
to
the
do.
grant is closed out.
Okay.
Now, the Central Sierras award process, on this program, you have to work with a technical assistance provider on your application. This is because there will be a technical review, and this is to really streamline that process for the farmer and rancher, so that you're not having to deal with the kicking back and forth. There might be a bit of that just because that's the reality sometimes. However, this is really to streamline the process so that you're putting in as robust of an application as possible, okay? So there is on the website, which is not live yet, but when it is, I will be emailing that out. So like I said, please sign up for the email list and then I can let you know when it's live. There is an intake form, or you can contact Placer, Amador, and El Dorado, Georgetown Divide directly, okay? Again, there will be an intake meeting going over resource concerns, land use, feasibility practices, and really assisting you, okay? Like, this isn't for us to come in and tell you guys, we think you should do this and we think you should do this. We want to know, what do you want to do and how can we help you do that, okay? Then we will conduct a site visit, again, if necessary. Again, we work on the application together. We use the replan tool. The applications should be identical. So if you submit an incentives grant, all you should have to do is copy and paste it over into the Central Sierra's application. That is if, of course, you don't want to go for the 200,000. But surprisingly, some people will find, I've had someone who they were trying to range seed. I think they said at least 50 acres and they didn't even meet the threshold for the 100. But that was a couple years ago, okay? So just be mindful of that. If you want to keep your application the exact same, all you have to do is copy and paste it over. If you want to increase what you are going for, then we can readjust your project design for that, okay? Placer does the administrative review. The technical assistance providers will be doing the technical review. So that's why it works just work with a technical assistance provider. Your contract, if you are awarded, the contract will be with Placer. Ideally, these will be sorted out by June, July, okay? Then CDFA, though, will review the application just to make sure you've not been awarded through the incentives grant at the same time, or to make sure that if you've been previously awarded in the past, you're not implementing the same practice on the same land, okay? And again, you're eligible for a 25% advance payment rate. It's the same verification process and the same reimbursement process, okay? One thing that I did not mention, if you have been awarded in the past, you can apply on the same parcel number, but it has to be on different fields. So if you didn't implement a practice on all of your land, you can't reapply for the same fields or pastures or vineyards that you've already implemented your practice on. If you have additional acreage that you want to implement the practice on, you can apply for that. And they'll be able to see that within the replan tool. They'll be able to cross-reference to make sure that you're not overlapping on the same fields, okay?
You want to, I'll wait. You're going to open up the questions.
Yeah. So that, let me just make sure there's nothing else I want to say to you guys on here. And that is all I have to say. Currently, this is my contract information. My card is on the table in the back as well. CDFA are available to answer your questions directly if you'd like to submit them to them directly. That is the email. This is the website for just the incentives program. CDFA is currently taking in general questions about the application process. You would have needed to submit them today to get a response by January 16th. Those responses will be posted on their website. But there's an extra period from January 26th. Responses will be posted on January 30th, or you can come to me, give me your questions. I can submit them directly to CDFA as a technical assistance provider. Okay. Any questions?
So say a grower applies for the CDFA program and maxes out the 100 and then also wants to apply through the Central Sierra program.
Yeah.
And wants to apply for more. Are they going to find out about, it sounds like they can choose one or the other.
Yes, so you can only be funded through one of the grant streams, and they'll be able to see that based off of your parcel number and based off of your unique tax ID.
So then
So you
Would
can't,
you find out at the same time, or you're finding out about CDFA before you're finding out about Central Sierra?
my guess is you're gonna find out about from the incentives grants much sooner on. They're working, it's been a process in the past where people have not been notified until like much later that they've been awarded. They're really working on letting people know that they've been awarded on a day-to-day basis. So, and they actually said that the awarding process is they're going to go through all the applications they're gonna receive in a day. They're gonna go through those, and then they will post those applications on a day-to-day basis of which ones have been awarded. So you should know within that application window period if you've been awarded by the incentives grant. If you've not been awarded, they probably will take their time in letting you know you've not been awarded. But like I said, 11 million for statewide is a very small amount. Submit your application in the first, I would say, if it was me, I would open up the portal at noon on January 22nd, submit my application and be done with it. Because I think, like I said, within 3 days, probably that money's gonna be gone. That would be my guess.
It's interesting, they don't pick the best application, they just pick the first ones.
Yeah, well, and I think
it used to not be first come, first served.
I'm not familiar with the full history of it, so it could be that it used to, and the problem that possibly what they were running into was that they weren't letting people know in time for that first year implementation, right? So that could be a reason of why they've chosen to do it on first come, first served basis. But I'm not familiar with that reason. Do you have a question?
So if I call you up Monday and say, can we sit down and you could help me apply?
Yes, that
As long
is,
as, I mean, probably not Monday, but at least Monday talk to you and say, what do you need? Because like APN practices that I want to do, because like I said, there's no way I've ever done this before.
Yeah.
And I don't navigate a computer as well as you younger people.
no,
And that's what I definitely would like to apply to one or the other, but that's something you could do for
yes.
anyone that's interested.
Yeah,
in
anyone
doing
that's
it.
in here, I'm available to help you with the application, with going through the software, with submitting your application. I can't be the one to click the submit button. You gotta be the one to do that because it's a first come, first served basis.
I'll push the button.
But, obviously I need to sit down with you. We
Yeah.
gotta go through the practices. We gotta look at where your parcel is. We gotta use the replan tool together. And what I'm thinking of doing is on January 22nd and on January 23rd and January 24th, essentially offering office hours. And being like, come on in, you'll get in a time slot. If you get your information sorted beforehand, I've heard folks say that it can take they can get it done in 2 hours. And so I would like that if next week, if you want to do it, please get in contact with me. We could create a rough draft. And then, like I'm saying, on the day of, all we have to do is just copy and paste everything in and hit submit.
Is the expectation that this program will be as big or bigger next year, the following year, growing, or?
So this year, clarify, it was meant to be 43 million available statewide. But because of the state budget deficit, they cut it down to 11, which is then why this application period got kicked back to now. Ideally, this program would be budgeted for year after year. Technically it is, but the reality is that it is part of the carbon credits program by the government. So that depends on what money becomes available from that. It's a market rate, right? So it goes up, it goes down. Depends on what funds they get from it. And then it depends on if there are priorities higher up in the funding stream, right? So there have been some gap years in this program being offered. However, once you are awarded, they are obligated to work with you through the grant term. They're obligated to pay you through that grant term. It is a contract. Okay. So right now, we will find out, by June, we will have a good idea if this program is going to be available for a autumn 2024 application window. Because keeping in mind, this was meant to be a fall 2023 application window. So it wouldn't technically be two in the same year. It should still be considered a fall 2023 because practice implementation starts now. There are people advocating for it within the legislature to make sure it stays a priority. If the state wants to reach their climate goal priorities, then this is seen as being a critical part of it. Any other questions?
You did a great job. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming out. Thank you.
No, thank you all very much for very much for coming out. And like I said, please take my card. Please do get in touch with me. Please fill out these surveys so I can know. Again, it can be in full anonymity, however you say that word, but it makes me sure I know, makes me be sure I'm supporting you in the way that you want to be supported. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Scott, a certified